Eric Schmidt is the former CEO of Google who helped scale the company from a fast-growing startup into one of the most powerful technology companies in the world. He went from being a computer science professor and software executive working behind the scenes to leading Google through its IPO, overseeing explosive global expansion and helping build a company valued in the trillions. Need motivation?
Watch a top 10 with Believe Nation.
And if you've been here before, drop a hashtag Believe in the comments below so I can feature you here in a future video. And if you're new, welcome to Believe Nation, the only channel that helps you believe in yourself daily, one video at a time. Believe. Okay, let's kick it off with rule number 1. Surround yourself with brilliant people.
If there were like a set of first principles that everyone should be thinking about when it comes to doing something great and building something great, what are those like first principles?
So the first rule I've learned is that you need a truly brilliant person to build a really brilliant product. And that is not me. I work with them. So find someone who's just smarter than you, more clever than you, moves faster than you, changes the world, is better spoken, more handsome, more beautiful, whatever it is that you're optimizing, and ally yourself with them. Because they're the people who are going to make the world different. In one of my books, we use the distinction between divas and knaves. And a diva, and we use the example of Steve Jobs, who clearly was a diva, opinionated and strong and argumentative and would bully people if he didn't like them, but was brilliant when he was a diva. He wanted perfection, right? Aligning yourself with Steve Jobs is a good idea. The alternative is what we call a knave. And a knave, which you know from British history, is somebody who's acting on their own account. They're not trying to do the right thing. They're trying to benefit themselves at the cost of others. And so if you can identify a person in one of these teams, they're just trying to solve the problem in a really clever way. And they're passionate about it and they want to do it. That's how the world moves forward. If you don't have such a person, your company's not going to go anywhere. And the reason is that it's too easy just to keep doing what you were doing, right? And innovation is fundamentally about changing what you're doing. Up until this generation of tech companies, most companies seem to me to be one-shot wonders. Right, they would have one thing that was very successful, and then it would sort of, it was typically follow an S-curve, and nothing much would happen. And now I think the people are smarter, people are better educated. You now see repeatable waves. A good example being Microsoft, which is an older company now, founded in basically 81, 82, something like that. So let's call that 45 years old. But they've reinvented themselves a number of times, right, in a really powerful way.
Rule number 2 is be curious.
For someone that's starting out in tech, what's sort of the mindset or the practice that you think is going to compound the most over the next decade?
So if you look at success, it's a combination of intelligence, that is ability to do the work, and grit. And I would add intelligence, grit, and curiosity. When I was young, I was a sponge for everything because I didn't seem to know anything, or I thought I knew nothing. And the internet had not really been invented yet. It was just getting started. And so we didn't have the resources we have today. If I were a 16 or 18-year-old or 20-year-old, whatever, right now, I would be online all the time just learning because I would be curious and I want to know everything. Mayer, tell me about yourself. Tell me about your family. Tell me what you do. How did you get here? What are the problems? And I trained myself to look at businesses and say, how do they work? Right? Like, how does this place work? How did you fund this? What was it your idea? Who did you work with?
Pain.
But that's grit, right? So you have to have the intelligence. I have all sorts of friends who are brilliant who can't get through the day, right? They wake up, they have an idea, they have another idea. Nothing happens with them. It's the people who have an idea that's very clever and they have the tenacity to push it. Those things come from curiosity. Another example, and this, I think, the technology that we're in is so extraordinary, and I'm so excited about it, but there are some things we've lost. One of them that we've lost is the looking out the window phenomena. And there's some evidence that looking out the window is fundamentally important for curiosity. So here's an example for all of you. When you're leaving here today sometime, turn off your phone, tell everyone who's around you to shut up in a nice way, and look out the window and daydream. That daydream is important too, because that's how the creative thoughts come.
Rule number 3, develop critical thinking skills.
If you were sat at that table with me yesterday, when I was trying to give Raf advice on what knowledge he should acquire at 18 years old, what would you have said? And what are the principles that sit behind that?
The most important thing is to develop analytical, critical thinking skills. To some level, I don't care how you get there. So if you like math or science, or if you like the law, or if you like entertainment, just think critically. In his particular case, as an 18-year-old, what I would encourage him to do is figure out how to write programs in a language called Python. Python is easy to use, it's very easy to understand, and it's become the language of AI. So the AI systems, when they write code for themselves, they write code in Python. And so you can't lose as developing Python programming skills. And the simplest thing to do with an 18-year-old man is say, make a game. Because these are typically gamers, stereotypically. Make a game that's interesting using Python.
It's interesting because I wondered if coding, I think 5-10 years ago, everyone's advice to an 18-year-old is learn how to code. But in a world of AI where these large language models are able to write code and are, increasing every month in their ability to write better and better code, I wondered if that's like a dying art form.
Yeah, a lot of people oppose this, and that's not correct. It sure looks like these systems will write code, but remember the systems also have interfaces called APIs, which you can program them. So one of the large revenue sources for these AI models, because these companies have to make money at some point, right, is you build a program and you actually make an API call and ask it a question. Typical example is give it a picture and tell me what's in the picture. Now, can you have some fun with that as an 18-year-old? Of course, right? So when I say Python, I mean Python using the tools that are available to build something new, something that you're interested in.
And when you say critical thinking, what is critical thinking, and how does one go about acquiring that as a skill?
Well, the first and most important thing about critical thinking is to distinguish between being marketed to, which is also known as being lied to, and being given the argument on your own. We have, because of social media, which I hold responsible for a lot of ills as well as good things in life, we've sort of gotten used to people just telling us something and believing it because our friends believe it or so forth. And I strongly encourage people to check assertions. So you get people to say all this stuff, and I learned at Google all those years. Somebody says something, I check it on Google. And you then have a question. Do you criticize them and correct them, or do you let it go? But you want to be in the position where somebody makes a statement. Like, did you know that only 10% of Americans have passports? Which is a widely viewed but false statement. It's actually higher than that, although it's never high enough in my view in America. But that's an example of an assertion that you can just say, is that true, right? And there's a long meme about American politicians where the Congress is basically full of criminals. It may be full of one or two, but it's not full of 90. But again, people believe this stuff because it sounds plausible. So if somebody says something plausible, just check it. You have a responsibility before you repeat something to make sure what you're repeating is true. And if you can't distinguish between true and false, I suggest you keep your mouth shut, right? Because you can't run a government, a society, without people operating on basic facts. Like, for example, climate change is real. We can debate over whether it's how to address it, but there's no question the climate is changing. It is a fact. It is a mathematical fact. And how do I know this? And somebody will say, well, how do you know? And I said, because science is about repeatable experiments and also proving things wrong. So let's say I said that climate change is real. And this was the first time it had ever been said, which is not true. Then 100 people would say, that can't be true. I'll see if he's wrong. And then all of a sudden, they'd see I was right and I'd get some big prize, right? So the falsifiability of these assertions is very important. How do you know that science is correct? It's because people are constantly testing it.
Rule number 4, have big dreams.
In your book, Genesis, you strike a cautiously optimistic tone, which you obviously co-authored with Henry Kissinger. When you look ahead to the future, what should we all be excited about?
Well, I'm of the age where some of my friends are getting really dread diseases. Can we fix that now? Can we just eliminate all of those? Why can't we just take these and right now eradicate all of these diseases? That's a pretty good goal. I'm aware of one nonprofit that's trying to identify in the next 2 years all human druggable targets and release it to the scientists. If you know the druggable targets, then the drug industry can begin to work on things. I have another company I'm associated with, which has figured out a way, allegedly, was a startup, to reduce the cost of stage 3 trials by an order of magnitude. As you know, those are the things that ultimately drive the cost structure of drugs. That's an example. I'd like to know where dark energy is, and I'd like to find it. I'm sure that there is an enormous amount of physics in dark energy, dark matter. And think about the revolution in material science. Infinitely more powerful transportation, infinitely more powerful science, and so forth. I'll give you another example. Why do we not have every human being on the planet have their own tutor in their own language to help them learn something new, starting with kindergarten? It's obvious. Why have we not built it? The only possible answer is there must not be a good economic argument. The technology works. Teach them in their language, gamify the learning, bring people to their best natural names. Another example, the vast majority of healthcare in the world is either absent or delivered by the equivalent of nurse practitioners and very, very sort of stressed local village doctors. Why do they not have the doctor assistant that helps them in their language treat whatever with, again, perfect healthcare? I can just go on. There are lots and lots of issues with this world of the digital world. It feels like that we're all in our own ships in the ocean and we're not talking to each other. In our hunger for connectivity and connection, these tools make us lonelier. We've got to fix that, right? But these are fixable problems. They don't require new physics. They don't require new discoveries. We just have to decide. So when I look at this future, I want to be clear that the arrival of this intelligence, both at the AI level, the AGI, which is general intelligence, and then superintelligence, is the most important thing that's going to happen in about 500 years, maybe 1,000 years in human society, and it's happening in our lifetime. So don't screw it up.
Also, if you want to take real action after this video, I made a free worksheet just for you. It covers the top lessons from today, gives you space to write your biggest takeaways, and helps you build a simple action plan. It's 100% free. Just click the link in the description to go grab it. I'll see you there. Rule number 5 is build a team.
What's the coaching habit that you think you consistently use to raise the level of the team?
So I wrote a book so I had a coach named
This is the
Bill
book I read, by the way.
Yeah, that's right. We actually talked about it. I had a coach named Bill Campbell. And when I started at Google, the venture capitalist John Doerr said, "You need a coach." And I said, "I'm a big boy. I've run a lot of companies. I don't need a coach." And he said to me, "Do tennis players have coaches?"
Absolutely.
And I knew he had trapped me, right? Because the answer is, of course, they do, even though they may not be as good as the actual tennis player. Coaches do different things. And so we hired, or retained, if you will, Bill Campbell for free, became my best friend at the time. And what he coached was not an individual, but a team. And the thing I learned from Bill is, as a CEO, you manage the team. You don't manage the individuals. And you work on the team dynamics, but fundamentally it's a team sport. He was a football coach and not a particularly good one, but he was an extraordinary human leader. And there's a book, $1 Trillion Coach. If we were to write the book today, he died unfortunately some years ago, it would be called the $7 Trillion Coach, because he was the coach for Apple and Google. Think about it.
I think he was a Princeton coach, right?
No.
Yep.
Columbia. His winning record was terrible.
Like 0-10 or something like that, yeah.
So, but leadership, but I now understand that I needed coaching, my team needed coaching, and the way I manage is I manage as sort of CEO and coach. And you watch what's going on and you try to get people to work together. And there are various techniques, like tell the people who talk too much to let the people who don't talk as much talk more. I mean, stuff like that.
Rule number 6 is build a technical company culture.
In terms of company culture and how important that is for the success and prospects of a company, how do you think about company culture and how significant and important is it? And like when and who sets it?
So it's almost always set, company cultures are almost always set by the founders. I happen to be on the board of the Mayo Clinic. The Mayo Clinic is the largest healthcare system in America. It's also the most highly rated one. And they have a rule which is called the needs of the customer come first, which came out of the Mayo brothers, who've been dead for like 120 years. But that was their principle. And when I initially got on the board, I started wandering around. I thought, this is kind of a stupid phrase, and nobody really does this. And they really believe it, and they repeat it, and they repeat it, right? So it's true in non-technical cultures. In that case, it's a healthcare for service delivery. You can drive a culture even in non-tech. In tech, it's typically an engineering culture. And if I had to do things over again, I would have even more technical people and even fewer non-technical people, and just make the technical people figure out what they have to do. Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry for that bias, because I'm not trying to offend anybody. But the fact of the matter is, the technical people, if you build the right product, your customers will come. If you don't build the right product, then you don't need a sales force. Why are you selling an inferior product? Mm-hmm. So in the How Google Works book, and ultimately in the $1 Trillion Coach book, which is about Bill Campbell, we talked a lot about how the CEO is now the chief product officer, the chief innovation officer, because 50 years ago, you didn't have access to capital, you didn't have access to marketing, you didn't have access to sales, you didn't have access to distribution hours. I was meeting today with an entrepreneur who said, we'll be 95% technical. And I said, why? I said, well, we have a contract manufacturer, and our products are so good that people will just buy them. This happened to be a technical switching company. And they said it's only 100,000 times better than its competitors. And I said, it will sell. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, it doesn't work yet.
Yeah.
That isn't the point. But if they achieve their goal, people will be lined up outside the door. So as a matter of culture, you want to build a technical culture with values about getting the product to work, right? And working is not another thing you do with engineers, is you say, they make a nice presentation to you and they go, I said, that's very interesting. But I'm not your customer. Your customer is really tough, because your customers wants everything to work and free and work right now and never make any mistakes. So give me their feedback. And if their feedback is good, I love you. Mm-hmm. And if their feedback is bad, then you better get back to work and stop being so arrogant. Mm-hmm. So what happens is that in the invention process within firms, people fall in love with an idea and they don't test it. One of the things that Google did, and this was largely Marissa Mayer, way back when, is one day she said to me, I don't know how to judge user interface.
Marissa Mayer was the previous CEO.
She was the CEO of Yahoo, and before that, she ran all the consumer products at Google. And she's now running another company in the Bay Area. But the important thing about Marissa is she said, I said, well, the UI, the user interface is great at the time, and it certainly was. And she said, I don't know how to judge the user interface myself, and none of my team do. But we know how to measure. And so what she organized were A/B tests. You test one, test another. So remember that it's possible using these networks to actually kind of figure out, because they're highly instrumented, dwell time. How long does somebody watch this? How important it is. If you go back to how TikTok works, one of the signals that they use include the amount of time you watch, commenting, forwarding, sharing, all of those kinds of things. And those, you can understand those as analytics that go into an AI engine that makes a decision as to what to do next, what to make viral.
Rule number 7 is keep pushing forward.
I think when you're running stuff, you make lots of mistakes. So I hold myself responsible for not getting ahead. We had the technology to do what Meta is doing now, and we didn't implement it fast enough, right? That's what I hold myself responsible.
Sure.
But in general, if you just keep pushing, it works. And one of the key ideas about success is just keep doing stuff. What happens in organizations, especially if I can be honest, in middle age, is everything becomes sort of normal. And I was interested in the innovation culture of America. Ken Burns is a friend of mine, and I was watching him, and he was asked, is America in crisis? And he said, oh, I think it's in perpetual crisis. We've always been disagreeing, and our revolution is the thing. So when you understand that the system is not designed to be static, it's designed to be dynamic, and it's a jump ball, then you can do it. I've consistently been slow to see that if I do self-criticism, and I've consistently assumed that stable systems were always stable. Humans can always change the system if you need to. Figure out a way to change it to make it a better place.
Rule number 8 is have a 5-year plan.
I'd like to ask you a question, a general question for all businesses. If you were coaching a business class or a company, how does a company remain nimble today? What does it have to do to remain nimble?
My problem with most strategy conversations is that they're always inward out. You know, we establish, well, first, we're the best in the world, because everybody thinks that, which can't possibly be true. And second, we see that all of our products are going to be successful, and therefore we'll be very successful in the future. And that's usually how strategy is done in businesses. I prefer a completely different approach. Work very, very, very hard to figure out what the world's going to look like in 5 years. What will people be doing? What will your customers want? Where will costs will be? In our case, what will networks look like? How important will phones be? What will the apps look like? What services? And spend an awful lot of time on that. And then take a look at your offerings. What are the strongest ones? Which are the ones that are going to iterate quickly? You're probably going to do fine there. You understand those businesses. What about these others? If you think about in the media business, there are media businesses that are growing very well and others that are in great trouble. This was completely predicted 5 years ago, right? So the leaders in the ones that are in trouble should have, right, done a 5-year plan and said, holy cow, what are we going to do? What are the things we do? Or maybe we sell ourselves or we try something different. But almost all of these strategic shifts are predictable using my 5-year model. Almost nobody does a 5-year plan. Most businesses do a 1 to 2 year plan.
Especially in your space.
Especially in our space, but even in most businesses. The only business that I discovered that does a 5-year or longer plan is the oil and gas industry. And the reason is because they have to deploy so much capital and do all this planning. But even there, they have trouble because the prices go up and down and so forth. So even there, it's difficult.
Rule number 9 is help your customers be successful.
One of the ideas that we had a few years ago was that we would be better off with more and more people in our ecosystem. And the best way to do that is to essentially help entrepreneurs be successful. That doesn't mean they're captive to us. They're still going to use competitor products and competitor ad systems and competitor platforms. But it seems one of the things that people don't understand when they view business is they assume that business is, how to describe it, it's a zero-sum game. That if company A wins, company B loses. I'll tell you that when Yahoo was young and Terry Semel was running it, whenever he and his company would win a deal, I would call him to congratulate him. And whenever we would win a deal, he would call me to congratulate me. Now, by the way, we were tough competitors. Why would we do that? Because we both understood that we were building a larger market. So you can understand our goal as philanthropic, you can understand it as making the world a better place, but you can also understand it as self-interested in that building more people who understand the concepts of network computing and platforms and so forth benefits everyone, including Google.
And rule number 10, the last one before a very special bonus clip, is don't narrow your focus.
I don't agree that you should narrow your focus. What I believe is that you get the best outcome when you make the broadest appeal in terms of leadership and excitement and so forth. And we worked very hard to make that happen. But there were other things. For example, we would refuse to do exclusive deals with people, but I would explain to people, well, we don't really do exclusive deals, but we only have the capacity to work with one, and it's going to be you, right? So that there are other ways of achieving those kinds of things. So I'd be careful to conclude that you should do a small thing. All success starts from doing one thing really, really well, but you'll recruit better with a broader vision that's credible and that you can articulate. But go back to that selling the dream, right? What you do is selling a dream. If you can't sell the dream, then you're not going to be successful.
What would you tell a founder they should do to protect and to hold on to their equity? What advice would you give them?
Well, I can always tell when we're dealing with a proper founder when we start with how are they spending their money. And so whenever I go into a startup that has beautiful offices and really nice chairs, I cringe. Because that means that they haven't quite figured out that it's not their money. Unless it is their money, in which case they can waste it on that. When I joined Google, I was given an office and I had a little corner of a desk with 4 other engineers. Eventually, I was given an 8x12 office where my desk was a door with hobby horses, whatever they are.
Like the tabletop was a door?
Tabletop, literally a door, which I've retained to try to remind myself of what it takes to be successful. So my office today has that door in it. The great founders are frugal. They understand that the money needs to be used precisely for certain areas. Many of the most successful founders begin with no salary at all. I have lots of stories about Larry and Sergey, but let's just say that when I started, one of them was having trouble with his car, so I had to loan him his car because his car broke down, or my car, because it broke down. I mean, that's the kind of stuff we're talking about. And so if you're not prepared to live that, you don't really understand what being a founder is like. I mean, for me, I'd love to be a founder. I'd love to have a nice corner office with a beautiful view and lots of secretaries. And all this. That's not how it works, right? And the great founders always started that way. So that should give you some data.
And congratulations, you're one video closer to who you're meant to be. Believe. To watch 10 amazing rules from Sergey Brin, check the video right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
I think that's a little bit of sort of his passion. And so, yeah, we did have fairly early on the, very ambitious mission statement.